This film recounts a standard ceremony that corresponds to what is found in the ritual for celebrations. Certain aspects of the celebrations may be adapted according to the needs of the location and traditions. The vigil ceremony precedes the investiture ceremony, and during preparations in the sacristy, we usually see some of the symbols that will be used. The sword, which will be held by the person to be invested during the ceremony, symbolically recalls the defense of truth and peace in justice. The spurs, on which the investee rests his hand during the ceremony, recall the care one must have for the things of God, spurring one to attend to works of justice, peace, and Christian charity. Instead, the dame investee will receive a vase of perfumed oils during the vigil ceremony, expressing devotion to Christ, following the example of the women who cared for him. The insignias of rank are positioned in a suitable place to be bestowed upon the knights and dames during the ceremony. It is suggested, if the structure of the church allows it, that the investee's capes will be placed in the church prior to the ceremony, so that they may be blessed during the vigil. If conditions do not permit this, the knight investees and dame investees will carry the capes on their left arm, with the embossed cross facing outwards. Nevertheless, the investees will receive their capes the following day during the investiture ceremony. The entrance procession leaves about 10 minutes before the start of the vigil. It is led by the lay master of ceremonies, followed by the knights carrying the sword and spurs, and the dame with the vase of perfumed oils. This is followed by the investees according to order. Priests, religious knights and religious dames if present, and the lay investees, if any and if practical. Behind each investee is the knight sponsor or dame sponsor. Once in the central aisle, the knights and dame with symbols advance to their position next to the altar, while the investees take their positions in the front pews. In the entrance procession, the knight or dame bearing the standard of the lieutenancy is followed by the section banner, local delegation banner, members of the council of the lieutenancy, section presidents and local delegates, section and delegation priors, and the priests. In 2 rows, the religious knights and dames and the newly promoted knights and dames follow. Then, the members of the council of the lieutenancy, the section presidents, and the local delegates take their places to the right of the altar. To the left of the altar, positioning themselves from the apse, as seen in the video, the official representatives of the other lieutenancies attending the ceremony at the invitation of the host lieutenancy take their places. A few minutes later, the liturgical procession proceeds, typically introduced by the thurible, the incense boat, the crucifer, and 2 candlesticks. This is followed by the lieutenant of the place, and if present, the vice-governor general of the area, the governor general, and the lieutenant general. Next comes the priest or deacon with the gospel, the concelebrating priests, and the celebrant, followed by the ecclesiastical master of ceremonies on the left. A knight and a dame close the procession. The 2 rows to the left and right of the altar are reserved for authorities. On the right, in the front row, are the governor general, the local lieutenant, and the section president. In the second row are the delegates and priors. On the left, if present, are the members of the Grand Magisterium in the front row, and the members of the Council of the Lieutenancy in the second. The Grand Prior of the Lieutenancy, if it is the Grand Master who is celebrating, also sits in this section, as do other authorities of the order, or civil authorities or guests of honor if present. Before giving the floor to the celebrant, the lieutenant offers a brief welcome. After, the celebrant leads the rite of introduction and the litany proceeds. The liturgy of the word follows with the readings prescribed by the ritual. After the homily, one of the most solemn moments of the celebration begins, consisting of the blessing of the robes, the pledge, and the presentation of the symbols to the investees. First, the lay master of ceremonies takes to the lectern and introduces the blessing of the robes. Meanwhile, the investees take their positions in rows in front of the altar. Once positioned, the celebrant blesses the robes with the aspergillum. At this point, the future knights and dames read the promise aloud together. Once the reading has been given, the investees reposition themselves in the central aisle, in single file, to return to the altar, where a lectern is placed, on which they sign the promise one by one, and then hand it over to the lieutenant. Returning to their places, each investee stops for a brief bow of greeting in the directions of the celebrant and then the Governor General if present. Once everyone has finished pledging their promises, the investees again line up in rows in front of the altar to receive their symbols. The celebrant presents the symbols to the investees individually. The investees, to whom the sword is presented to each person, raise it for 3 seconds, taking care to bring the hilt in front of his eyes and recalling at that moment the chivalrous values it evokes: defense of truth, peace, and justice. The knight investees then rest their hand on the spurs. The dame investees, on the other hand, are presented with the vase of oils, which they lift for 3 seconds, recalling the devotion and the call to care for those in need, as the women did by anointing the body of Jesus. The lieutenant approaches the celebrant, and the newly promoted are invited to stand up and stand in line in the nave. At this point, the assistant master of ceremonies and a knight carry the insignia of the newly promoted near the lieutenant, and the newly promoted are called one by one to the altar. The newly promoted bows, receives the insignia from the celebrant, bows again, and is congratulated by the celebrant and the lieutenant, and then returns to his or her seat. Following the awarding of promotions, if a knight or dame has been reported or signaled to receive a special distinction, he or she is notified at this time and approaches the celebrant and the lieutenant to receive it. The deacon now goes to the tabernacle accompanied by some knights and exposes the Blessed Sacrament in the monstrance. An appropriate time of Eucharistic adoration is recommended. The newly invested, as well as the knights and dames, are recommended to kneel. After the Eucharistic blessing and acclamations, the Blessed Sacrament is placed in the tabernacle, possibly with a song. Finally, the prayer of the knight and dame is read from the lectern by the lieutenant or by the highest-ranking authority present, in this case, the Governor General. The ceremony is concluded, and the exit procession takes place, generally led by the thurible, the incense boat, the crucifer, and 2 candlesticks, followed by the knight or dame with the standard of the lieutenancy, the section banner, and local delegation banner. They are followed by the lieutenant, and, if present, the vice-governor of the place, the Governor General, the Lieutenant General, the concelebrating priests, and the celebrant. When they have passed through the nave, if space permits, the knights and dames, arranged in a row along the aisle, greet the celebrant with the prosate.